everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Southern Woke.
I'm Marina.
And I'm Kaylin.
And we hope y'all had a very happy Thanksgiving, which is also known as the National Day of Mourning, but that's just a little hint as to where this episode will be going today. But yeah, we hope you had a great Thanksgiving with your families.
Dude, I ate so much food.
Me
so
too.
much freaking
I still have a whole pan of leftovers in my fridge that I don't know what I'm gonna do with.
Same. I have like some 7-day-old potato salad, and I'm not knowing if I should keep eating it at this point, but I swear I keep looking at it every day.
I know, I heated up some broccoli casserole last night and then looked at it and was like, it's been a week. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like we're just getting to that point where it's too much now.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I do have an intro topic for us today. And it ties into last time's episode of like all the crazy shit that could happen to Earth. So right after we put out that episode, I saw an article where SpaceX is launching a NASA spacecraft that will crash into an asteroid in the future. So basically, this is a form of planetary defense against the asteroid that is supposedly supposed to hit us within the next however many years. It's not any time incredibly soon, though.
So, do we, know it's going to hit us, or are we just saying, hey, there's a chance this could happen, let's just prepare it just in case? Or is it if we don't do this right, we're going to die?
I don't know, because I feel like they would make a bigger deal out of it if it was definitely going to hit us, and the mission would be a lot more intense.
Yeah.
But it seems like this is a more, let's see how it goes. These asteroids could hit us, they could be a problem. So, let's start this planetary defense system where we just send a spacecraft out there, and it's going to take 10 months to reach the asteroid. It's like a pair of asteroids that orbit each other, headed our way. And it would take 10 months, and by the time it gets to the asteroid, it would be traveling at 15,000 miles per hour. And they want to see how it would change the trajectory of the asteroids. So it's no guarantee that it could work, but I guess they're smart people over there.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll do something.
Dude, I am so down to invest money in a planetary defense system. We need that at this point. That's how we can take America to the next level. We need to start looking for defense from outer space.
Yeah, because when you think of how many things are out there, eventually they're gonna make their way. What if it's just that asteroid is just in a band of other stuff that's
yes.
all together, and it's gonna be the next few, throughout the next decade, just
that
stuff coming at us.
To think about.
Can
you imagine on the Weather Channel, instead of it just predicting the weather every day, it's there's gonna be an asteroid hitting on this day. It's just a normal thing.
Well, hopefully, if we're lucky, it misses us by just a hair, and we'll get beautiful meteor showers, whatever they're called. We'll just watch them in the sky going crazy. I'm surprised at how many shooting stars you can actually see.
So many, right? I feel just recently too I've been seeing so many of them.
You know, if you lay down at night at the lakefront on a clear night, you can just start seeing so many once you let your eyes focus. We used to do that in high school all the time. It was wild.
That is really cool. I'm gonna try that now.
Alright. So now that I scared y'all a little bit.
As if last episode wasn't enough of that.
Now we're going to be talking about Native Americans and how much they've got screwed over in their history. Well, since they met the English, at least.
Yeah, y'all, I don't know. And before I started researching this, I've always heard people say that, the indigenous people are mistreated and that we treated them wrong. And I've always heard that whole debate, but until I started researching it, we were kind of I'm saying we as in white colonists, kind of really messed them over. It wasn't not cool at all. It was really savage.
Yeah, it was utterly disgusting. I've always kind of known about how bad it was, but when you really start reading article on top of article and hearing crime case after crime case about what's going on in their reservations, it's so sad, and it's so wrong how America has alienated them. And they're just not talked about enough, so we're here to dedicate a whole episode and possibly more in the future to them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to start off, I wanted to tell y'all the story that textbooks tell you about Thanksgiving. So basically, they say that the first Thanksgiving was in 1621 when the Pilgrims came to the East Coast. In Massachusetts, they met a man named Squanto who belonged to the Patuxet tribe, which was a branch of the Wampanoag Nation. He saw the Pilgrims struggling with food in winter, so he helped them and taught them how to provide for themselves on the land. Then a treaty was made between the Indians and the Pilgrims, and it stated that they were all mutually protected and shared the land. One night, the Pilgrims finished dinner early and wanted to go shoot some guns in the woods. While shooting, Massasoit, which was the Wampanoag chief, heard the guns, so him and some men showed up. The Pilgrims invited them to join in and celebrate surviving their first winter together with a feast lasting a few days, and they decided to get together every year and call it Thanksgiving. Ah, so cute. But if only that actually happened. Okay, so the real story is a lot juicier and rated R. So, and it all starts in 1608. There were religious separatists in England that wanted to break free from the Church of England and practice whatever they wanted. And these were the Pilgrims. They tried to go to Holland at first, but they were too progressive for them. So by 1620, they hopped on the Mayflower and headed towards the New World. But also keep in mind, these were not the first English settlers, by the way. In 1607, there was a colony in Virginia, but I didn't research that because that's not what we're talking about. So they arrived near Cape Cod or Plymouth in Massachusetts during the winter, which was pretty freaking dumb because they've never experienced winter in the New World. So many Pilgrims died before the spring because of the cold and because of diseases they brought from England.
Okay, wait, real fast. Just not trying to stand up for Christopher Columbus here, but would he really have known that it was winter over here? Because didn't they sail from so far away that the seasons would have been different?
Columbus. That's not with him. Because apparently Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 or whatever it goes. He discovered that the land was there. That's
okay,
how
I'm
they
being
knew.
stupid. Wait.
It's okay. Because it is really confusing because history that we're taught growing up is so not right.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that you're confused because it takes a lot to really digest and remember the timeline once you know the facts. But yeah, Christopher Columbus was 1900s. They knew that the New World was there. And then I think, well, yeah, because he's the one that started the slave trade. And I'm pretty sure he might have slave traded some Native Americans. But anyways, that also explains why there was also a colony in 1607. But anyway, we're talking about just the Pilgrims, which were the religious people, which I'm sure they all were religious, but anyways. So the Pilgrims and also the Native Americans were dying by the bunches from the disease that the English brought over from Europe. So, okay, in March 1692, an Abenaki native introduced the Pilgrims to Massasoit, who then introduced them to Squanto, who was an English-speaking Native American. And he did help the Pilgrims learn to survive, and they did celebrate with a long feast. But as time went on, more English came over, and the area became overpopulated with them. These newer Pilgrims either didn't know about the Native Americans helping them when they first arrived, or they just didn't care because they began harming and killing the Native Americans and taking their land. The green corn ceremony attack was the biggest attack of that time, and one of the native tribes, the Pocots, I think is how you say it, were celebrating the 4-day-long event. The Pilgrims didn't agree with Squanto's treaties, so in the early morning hours after their ceremony had ended, the English soldiers showed up and surrounded the entire village and ordered them all to come outside, and the ones that refused to come out, they set their shelter on fire, and they were burned alive, and the ones that did come out were shot or beat with clubs. And a new celebration was formed of the English's victory called Thanksgiving. And so really Thanksgiving is about the English people celebrating the fact that they just killed all those Native Americans. Yay! Not really.
Guys, if y'all think like stuff like that sounds like shocking and tragic, every other story in this is going to be just like that. Like,
Yeah.
it literally blows your mind as you're going through, and you're like, this isn't all just made up. Like, this is real. We're just
Like, I cannot even try to put myself in the English's mindset or the Native Americans, because, like, did they just think they came over here and they were just not human at all? They were just animals that they could slaughter?
yeah.
Because that's how they were treated. And, like, I almost feel biased, even though I shouldn't, because, like, I do have Native American in my family, even though obviously I look like a basic white girl. But, like, I do feel so defensive, which any decent person should feel defensive for them, because it was wrong. But still, it's like, I get so heated.
I know, and I really came into this, y'all, because I know I've been seeing a bunch of stuff on my TikTok and stuff recently, just like bashing Thanksgiving and saying like you should look into it. And I was like, no, like I don't want to say no to Thanksgiving. Like this was a holiday that my family spent together every single year. Like I don't want to be that person that just starts hating on Thanksgiving. And I think it's still okay, I feel like, to be, if you celebrate Thanksgiving as being thankful for your people around you, but you also need to know where it came from and that it was not based the way that we're always taught that it was based.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being thankful. Just the origin of the story is fucked.
Yeah.
Okay, where was that? Okay, so the Pilgrims continued after this, attacking tribes and selling girls that were 14 plus into sex trades and murdering the Native Americans. There were bounties for Indian scalps, and they would make soccer balls with the scalps and kicked it around in celebration. Like, the government literally just put bounties on their scalps so that more of them could die and they would get what they wanted.
Did you like see the other like incentives that the government made in order to kill, like they like slaughtered like most of the buffaloes? I have a statistic somewhere in here because you like buffaloes first of all were like really sacred to the
Yeah, anything living really.
I wish I could find the exact number. I can't find it, but there was like an absurd amount of buffalo that used to live on North America before the English came over, and then they literally set up a bounty and they would pay people to kill off the buffalo because that was their main supply of food in order to like starve off the Native American tribes. Like, so the government was like completely involved. It wasn't just like random people mistreating the Native Americans. It was the directly government.
And it still is in a way.
You know, the French weren't as bad as the English were though. The French and the Indians kind of, or the French and the Native Americans, excuse me, kind of got along.
I know, y'all forgive us if that slips out. I try my best not to use the Indian term, but
when you hear it's talked about though in history, they always refer to them as Indians, so it's hard to get that word out of my head.
Yeah, I think that was the only time I had that word like written down in my notes. I think everywhere else it's either like Native American or Indigenous, because like I do not want to disrespect y'all in any way. Okay, so most Indian chiefs were beheaded, and the leader of the Wampanoag tribe, which was such a significant figure to the Native Americans. Like, whoever your chief is, like, they are almost God. But, he was beheaded, and his head was put on a stick for 24 years for all the British to just, like, yeehaw about. And then George Washington became the first president in 1789, and he decided there would only be one day set aside every year to celebrate all the successful massacres. He created the Thanksgiving Proclamation, and there was absolutely no mention of the Native Americans that helped them survive throughout the winter. And had it not been for them, they wouldn't have survived. Or they wouldn't have survived in the large numbers that they did. But today, Thanksgiving is also known as the National Day of Mourning for Native Americans. And they, like, really get together at some, like, statues, like, of people that wrong them, like, because, you know, America's full of statues of horrible white men. Okay. Dude, I'm such an empath, and just, like, talking about just the notes I've written, like, I know this stuff, but, like, talking about it, it just, like, drains me. It makes me so sad. Okay. So now let's talk about America before Columbus discovered it. Because that's interesting too. Because, okay, so paint me a picture of what you think America looked like before Columbus discovered it. Like,
Like, how long back are you talking? Like, just like right before he discovered
Like
it?
maybe like 10 to 15,000 years ago. How many people do you think were living in America?
Like, I'm gonna sound really dumb if I'm wrong, but I'm saying around like 500,000 maybe?
Try 100 million.
100 million?
Yeah. That's how many Native Americans from like, because like they obviously weren't just like from America, they migrated from many, many, many different places. So the population of America was way more than the most generous estimations, obviously. And it also began much earlier than we thought. So the migrations from the Alaskan land bridge that happened like during the Ice Age, that brought over a lot of people. And also people from Polynesia came on boats by like the buttloads. So they were traveling to America for a while. And like I said, the population is thought to be around 100 million people. And estimates of when the first people came to America come from carbon dating the earliest human remains found and comparing them to the genetics in Siberia, which would be the land that like connected to Alaska. And the 13,000 year ago estimate that they think the humans came may be off by 10,000 or more years. So history just keeps building on itself, yo. It's pretty cool.
I'm sorry.
Okay, what?
I was gonna say, I also read that they didn't all come over at like one time. Like, there could very well be like a large amount of them came over from that Bering Land Bridge, and then like 2,000 years later, another large group of them came over. But we kind of just segment all Native Americans as Native Americans, but it was a bunch of different cultures and places all coming at very different times.
Definitely. And there were so many of them that, and like the Native Americans cultivated the land to fit their needs. It's believed that America, before any kind of human was on it, was like a big wooded land. And the Native Americans came in, and the reason why we have these grasslands is because they burned down the forest there to make their crops. And so they'd have room to grow things. And like all the hills in random places, they most likely like did that by hand. They made hills to like irrigate the land in other places. Like,
how cool is that?
They are amazing people. And they had been working with the land for so long that they became a keystone species, which if you've never taken a biology class, that means it has a disproportionately large effect on its natural environment relative to its abundance. So basically they were a part of the ecosystem, like a lot. The mass deaths that the Native Americans suffered from the Pilgrims led to huge ecological changes to the continent that still happen to this day. Their decline led to a massive population explosion for bison and passenger pigeons. So I thought that was pretty interesting because, like, they're just such a natural-rooted society. Like, I wish I was more Native American because, like, I see myself as, like, thinking, like, spiritually so much like them. Obviously, it's for a reason. But, I don't know. They're just, like, freaking superstars in my mind. So, as time went on, more English people came to America. America started to become America. And then we have this history of shitty treaties that we made with them. And I'm just going to mention a few that piqued my interest. So one of them being the treaty with the Delawares in Fort Pitt in 1778. The representatives of the New Continental Congress signed a treaty with the Lenape, or they kept using Lenape and Delaware interchangeably, so I guess it was just like one tribe from Delaware, but also in Pennsylvania. I don't know. I guess states weren't states back then, so it's kind of tricky. But anyways, the first official peace treaty between the new United States and Native American nations, and both sides agreed to maintain a friendship and support each other against the British. Pennsylvania militiamen, though, killed nearly 100 Lenape because they thought they were responsible for the attacks against white settlers. But Americans then moved the Lenape territory, moved on to their territory till the Treaty of Greenville in 1795 forced them and the Ohio Native Americans to surrender most of their lands. So this was just the start of the Americans coming in and being like, oh, that's your land? Too bad, shorty. We're taking it. And then we have the Treaty of Hopewell in 1785 and 86. 3 very similar treaties with the Cherokee and Choctaw nations that extended friendship and protection of the United States to the Native American tribes, and all 3 ended with the same line. The hatchet shall be forever buried and peace given by the USA. Yeah, so sure. But the white settlers were already moving in on the Cherokee land when this treaty was signed. Then Andrew Jackson spearheaded the Indian Removal Act of 1830 through Congress, where the U.S. government granted land west of the Mississippi River to the native tribes who agreed to give up their homeland. The removal was supposed to be voluntary, but Jackson threatened to withhold payments and threatened with legal and military action whoa, my messy handwriting got me there. But anyways, 70 removal treaties over a course of his presidency, opening up 25 million acres of land in the South for whites in slavery.
Yep, and Jackson actually believed that the tribes were unable to assimilate because he kept trying to do like different policies. Did you have anything about like the boarding schools they used to take and send the kids to? I didn't really get to research into that, but apparently those were absolutely horrible. But he tried all these different ways of like getting the Native Americans to adapt to like living like white people, which is obviously such a change in culture and lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous to expect that. But he said that he believed that they were unable to assimilate and that the demise of the Native American way of life was inevitable. And he saw the Indian Removal Act as a humane policy and a generous act of mercy on behalf of the government. Like, that is such a disgusting way of putting that.
I know. The way they worded things were just so true to their awful selves. Now the white men in Congress try to sugarcoat their harsh words and like be politically correct, but back then they were like, yo, we tried to get them to work with us, but they didn't want to, so we're gonna kill them and take their land. Makes me so mad. Then we have the Treaty of New Echota. I don't know how to say these words, I'm so sorry. But this was in 1835 when the Cherokees resisted the removal from their ancestral lands and brought it to the Supreme Court. Even though the court ruled that they were a sovereign nation, the removal continued. In 1835, the U.S. government met with Cherokee representatives to sign a treaty that traded 7 million acres of Cherokee land for $5 million and land in the Indian Territory. In 1838, the U.S. sent 7,000 soldiers to remove them, and 10 to 25% of them died during the 1,200-mile trek to Oklahoma, later known as the Trail of Tears. And I feel like I should know more about the Trail of Tears. That's something else I want to like really heavily research, especially because where I'm about to move in Arkansas, like along the highways, there's so many like Trail of Tears signs, and I'm like, yo, they walk this land.
I feel like I remember learning about the Trail of Tears in history class and knowing that it was like the migration of the Indian people, but I feel like it was never really taught to us, the fact that we were literally taking them from their own lands and just dragging them. Yo, thousands of people died on this track. Mm-hmm. So like we promised them that we would give them compensation, food supplies, and protection to move them up there, and they were like, okay, we're gonna give up all of our lands for you to be able to do that and take care of us moving up there. And then thousands of them died on the way. Like, put that number in your head. You know what a room of 1,000 people looks like? How many people that is? And thousands of them died on the way up to Oklahoma, getting pushed out of their own lands. And then we just kind of teach it in history class, and we just kind of brush over that, and it's just like, oh, this is something that happened, but it's literal genocide. And you know, whenever you hear the word genocide, you probably think of like the Holocaust, but more Native Americans died than people did in the Holocaust, and we don't call that a genocide, or we don't call Native Americans and what we did was a genocide, but we say that about the Holocaust all day.
And it's just so sad. Like, America never gave them any reason to believe they would ever hold their word, but yet the Native Americans, like, gave them chance after chance, and they went back on their word every single time and took their land anyways and killed them if they didn't do what they wanted. And it makes me want to cry.
This could be like an awful example, but like imagine if there is like an alien species that comes along and is a lot more technologically advanced than we are, and they just want to come and like start taking our lands.
Yeah.
Like, they're obviously, we can't really, what are we going to do? We just kind of have to go along with it.
America would want to start a freaking war, and we would all die.
Yeah, because there would be like so much, I don't know, like...
It's just, I don't understand why people can't see that some people have one way of life, and if you don't agree with it, then, oh well, let them live theirs, and you live yours, as long as nobody is hurting each other.
Yeah.
And the Native Americans don't freaking believe in hurting each other.
Some of them did.
Well, after given good reason to, probably. Because best believe if you come on my reservation, boy, and you hurt my people, yeah, we're gonna come after you. But, like, the Americans always, it seemed, attacked first.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But I mean, like, there was definitely, like, conflict and wars between different tribes and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Tribal things. I mean, it's like gangs in the streets. Like, there's gonna be tensions. Let's see, what's the next effed up treaty? Okay, so the Fort Laramie Treaty in 1868, the U.S. government recognized the Black Hills of Dakota as a reservation, but after gold was discovered on the land, they said, never mind, and the whites began claiming the land, and the Native American resistance resulted in the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. By this time, Congress had stopped making treaties with Native Americans, declaring in 1871, henceforth no Indian nation or tribe shall be acknowledged or recognized as an Indian nation, tribe, or power within whom the U.S. may contract by treaty. So that was real great. In 1980, the Supreme Court ruled the land was illegally confiscated and awarded the Sioux tribe $100 million in reparations, but they said, we don't want your money. The land was never for sale. We just want our land. And if that doesn't speak mountains of what they're all about, like, I love them. Do you have any more, like, treaties type info before I get into more stuff?
I don't know if you mentioned this, but so whenever they were like moving all the different tribes, they also tried moving the Cherokee tribe, and when they refused to leave their land, the nation's chief, whose name was John Ross, he protested the removal. Okay, first of all, that also confused me. Like, one of the Native Americans' names was John. I'm assuming like we gave them like English names, like when they came over, and they just adopted it to fit in with white culture.
True. I mean, it could be a number of things.
Okay. Anyway, their leader's name was John Ross. He protested the removal to Congress, and he presented a petition with 16,000 Cherokee signatures. Congress approved the removal, but most of the Cherokees remained. They said, okay, well, we're not moving, we're not leaving our lands, and I don't really blame them. And the government sent out 7,000 troops who forced the Cherokee into stockades at Bayonet Point, and no one was allowed to gather their belongings before marching over 1,200 miles to Native American territory. Y'all, picture like a 5-mile run, and then think about what 1,200 miles is, and you're just marching at Bayonet Point without any of your surroundings after getting taken out of your home territory to move somewhere differently. That's what American people did.
And it's like not even just their home, it's like that land is so sacred to them. Like, they call it their ancestral land because, like, that's where they came and that's where they stayed for years. And the Americans were like, oh, no, this is our new discovery, bye.
And on that specific journey, over 5,000 Cherokee passed away. About 5,000 members of their tribe died on that journey, and we just don't talk about that.
It's sickening. And the Native Americans are sadly still being targeted today. And for an example, I want to talk about the case of Selena Not Afraid. And that goes again into the whole name thing. Like, different tribes name people differently. Like, Selena Not Afraid was her name. A lot of people like hear that and think like, is that like just a sentence?
Yeah.
No. So this takes place in Bighorn County, Montana. And before we get into the case, this is just some statistics of Montana. So the Native Americans make up a huge number of missing and murdered people in the whole country as a whole. In Montana alone, the Native American population is 6.7%, but yet they make up 26% of missing people, most being women and girls. These numbers are from 2016, but it's even gotten worse since then. The National Crime Database reports 5,712 cases of missing Native American girls or women across the U.S., yet the Department of Justice only has logged 116 of them. The Native Americans are often misidentified as white, black, Hispanic, anything other than Native American, so it like heavily skews their numbers in the national databases. And then also, Native American women are 10 times more likely to be murdered than the national average, and 84% will have experienced physical, sexual, or psychological abuse in their lifetime. That's way too much. But anyways, Selena Not Afraid was born on June 18th of 2003, and she was a twin sister. Altogether, her and her 5 siblings and her parents lived on the Crow Reservation. She was beautiful, kind, bubbly, and athletic. She loved riding horses and wanted to buy her own farm one day and become an Indian relay rider. But unfortunately, in 2014, her twin sister took her own life at the young age of 11. Imagine being 11 years old and being, like, wanting out. And I didn't get into, like, the specifics of her siblings' deaths, but I could only imagine, like, life on the reservation. Like, was it hard? Like, that hard? Or just, like, the everyday life? I don't even know.
11 years old, God.
It makes you wonder what she had already been through in 11 years. But, so that was obviously something her family had to learn to get through and deal with. But then, in 2017, her 23-year-old brother, Preston, was shot and killed by an officer. So then they had that to get through. That same year, her older sister died in a hit and run while walking down the street. So her family had been through so freaking much in the last few years. And when Selena was a junior in high school, on New Year's Eve of 2020, she went to a party with her friends in a nearby city. The next morning, her and 5 others were in a van headed home when the van broke down and they stopped at a rest stop, which is where Selena was last seen alive at 2 p.m. The man driving the van got it running again, but told Selena and her friend Arlana to stay because the van was probably going to break down again, and that he would send his mom to get them. And when his mom showed up, she didn't see Selena and found her friend Arlana sitting in a nearby ditch. And she had no memory of what happened. She had scratches all over her legs and her shoes were missing. So Selena's family called the police, and they came out and interviewed a lady that claimed to be a witness. And she said that she saw Selena run off to a field near the rest stop only after she had come up to this woman and asked her to go with her. But she said no. And the field was searched in a 3 to 5 mile radius with ATVs, dogs, drones, and helicopters. They had tribal police, city police, state police, and even the FBI out there helping. The family even camped at the rest stop to see if she would come back or anything. People began to think that Selena was abducted from the rest stop, and people were also calling in sightings of her, but none were actually her. 20 days after going missing, her body was found in that same field just 1 mile in. There were no footprints or tire tracks nearby, so foul play wasn't suspected, and the autopsy stated that her cause of death was hypothermia. Nothing makes sense, and it usually never does in these cases. There's a possible theory that the people in the van had an altercation, because after Selena's body was found, Arlana deleted her socials and 2 of the boys moved out of state. So this is just one example of like, yes, like I want to say that like the government doesn't care, but like the FBI went out and helped. But the thing is, when they go missing, like yes, they'll go search, but nothing is really ever investigated.
Yeah.
Because the reservations have their own police, and it's like where they lived, it was like right in the middle of like 3 jurisdictions, and so many women go missing in that area that it's like the odds of it being in the reservation or like in a different jurisdiction, it totally dictates how the case goes.
Yeah.
But whenever it's like outside of the reservation, the cops don't really help much. They never stay in contact with the family. They never further investigate. They just find them and say that they probably died of natural causes. Which, I mean, nothing makes sense though. Like, the fact that she was found a mile into this field from hypothermia, she was just a mile away from the rest stop. She could have just turned back and been in a building.
Yeah.
And then like her friend saying she doesn't remember anything, but then being sus afterwards, like they could have easily investigated those people. But because I don't know if maybe they were also from the reservation, I don't know. It made it sound like they weren't. But cases like this happen so many times a year.
So I don't know if this is, I read that it's true, but I don't know if you know anything about it. So I know that tribes have their own like tribal governments and their own laws that governs like the reservations that they're on. And that's completely separate from like our laws and our judicial systems. They have their own type. So I read basically that if somebody like a white man or
like a non-native,
that's the word I'm looking for, goes on to like a tribal territory and commits a crime and then leaves, there's nothing they can do about it because the tribal judicial system can't prosecute any somebody that's not part of their tribe, and then the government can't do anything because like that's the tribal territory. So
yeah, that is true.
like it says that it almost grants them impunity, and that's why there's also like such a problem with investigating these things. It's kind of like the government's like, oh, that's y'all's problem, you deal with it.
Yeah, the U.S. I have that too in here somewhere where the U.S. doesn't allow tribal courts to prosecute non-natives.
Exactly. So like there's nothing that they can do about it unless they want to like abolish the reservation and join society. It's like their options.
I also had a little example story under that part of my notes where a Dollar General store manager was accused of sexually assaulting a Choctaw minor on their reservation, and when the girl's parents found out, Mississippi wasn't gonna like prosecute him at all. Like, it was this whole big thing. They went for Dollar General as a corporation, and then like the Supreme Court had to get involved, and they ended up having a tie ruling. So they literally won, like the Native Americans won the case, but only because it was a tie. But it should have been unanimous.
Yeah.
But it's just like America's way of trying to always have their own way. But President Trump actually did something a little bit good. Well, a lot bit good. Who knows if it'll actually be used in the right way, though. But he signed the Savannah's Act and the Not Invisible Act, and was the first president to formally recognize the tragedy of murdered and missing Native Americans. And these acts are for a more coordinative law enforcement and data collection of the murdered and missing Native Americans. Whether that will actually be put into effect, who knows? Because everything the government has ever done for them has been taken right back.
Yep.
So, hey, Joe Biden, why don't you do something?
Seriously.
While you sleeping.
We'll
Dream up a great treaty that will never be taken back. As more of a thank you to the Native Americans that saved the white people's asses from dying of starvation in the middle of their cornfields, they've gotten in return also their sacred land taken from them, difficulty voting, virtually invisible in pop culture, They have almost no access to health care. Their health care on the reservation is scary because God forbid you need medical help. Oh my God.
Yep.
They're supposed to get health care provided by the federal government, but what they're allowed each year is given to the Indian Health Service, which is unsurprisingly underfunded. They often run out of money 6 months into every year, and their budget is only 45% adequate of what it should be. And say someone needs immediate medical help on a reservation, it could take the ambulance up to 45 minutes to get there, and the people that do make it to the hospital are met with a lack of advanced equipment and often turned away by the Indian Health Service because they only have resources for desperate circumstances. And they're often given an ice pack and Advil. And like say you're in a situation where like you could lose your arm, they're gonna be like, you still have your life though.
Yeah.
Oh well. And it's not like they want to do that, they just literally aren't funded enough to be able to care. So I could see how like your average American could look at that and be like, oh wow, they have like shitty health care, but like they work with what they have.
Yeah.
We only give them so much.
So, did you see anything about the like sterilization of 24% of like the Native women? The UN like demanded a report on it.
No.
I hate to like tease something because I don't have a lot of information on it, but I did see it as part of one of the articles I read that in 1977 the United Nations released a report prepared in conjunction with the Native American Solidarity Committee outlining the genocidal practices of the U.S. government. So kind of like they were like kind of like calling us out on it, like saying, hey, like we need answers for all this. And apparently in that report, it included talking about the sterilization of Native American women, and the report concluded that 24% of Native women had been sterilized and that 19% of women were of childbearing age. So like, I needed to like look more into that. That's kind of crazy, especially like in a UN article about that. You don't ever hear anything about that.
Of course, because America's not going to put anything out on that. There was so much I wanted to talk about for this episode, but I didn't realize that on top of like school, this was also like Black Friday weekend, and I worked my literal ass off. But we can always come back and revisit this subject and have tons more accurate information for you guys to learn about Native Americans and like just everything they've been through and how we can help. It's just so crazy.
This is also a weird time to bring this up at, but did you know that, so like obviously our diseases that we brought over from like England killed a ton of Native Americans. That's like one of the main things that wiped so many of them out. Well, when like we were at war with certain tribes, we would withhold vaccines from certain tribes that we wanted to die off. Like if we were at war with them. That's ridiculous. And then also, if we wanted to kill people off, the Americans would take blankets and like use them for like smallpox victims, and then gift those blankets to the tribes, and they would just wipe out entire tribes that way. Like that's crazy that we like that's some like crazy like psychopathic stuff. Like,
fuck.
Is that not insane? When I read that, I was like, no way.
I know so many things that they've done. You're just like, humans did that. What?
And let me leave y'all off with this statistic. An estimated 10 million indigenous people were living in what is the U.S. when Christopher Columbus reached it. Wait, you already told me that earlier.
100 million, actually.
But by 1900, there were fewer than 300,000 Native Americans left. I don't even know what the percent decrease that is, but that's definitely like at least, yeah, I don't even know. That's an insane decrease.
Yeah. Well, if you're Native American and you're listening to this right now, I'm sorry that the white people suck so much. I'm sorry what they did to you. And like, I wish I could take it back, but all I can do is offer my love and sympathy. And make sure that people that live here and any other country know your true story. Because it's worth telling. And it's a freaking problem. Like, so many girls go missing. Like, I wish I had a better statistic, but like, Go to any reservation and just like ask how many missing people do you have right now, and you'll probably be astounded. It's just crazy. And like I've been recently trying to figure out more of my ancestry, because I know on my mom's side, like that's all English. I don't really care to learn about that.
Yeah.
But my dad's side, that's like he's got Choctaw and Cherokee in him. And I just learned that his real dad that died when he was just a baby had like 3 other kids, and they currently live in Seattle. Well, the surviving one and a nephew of my dad's. And next year sometime we're going to go there and just see if they have any information on like my dad's dad and like the Indian ancestry. And I'm going to take like a DNA ancestry thing and see if anything Native American comes back in it. It's just cool to know.
Heck yeah.
I want to feel like I'm more tied to this land, because I feel so distant from it, because like I don't want any part to do with the people that currently inhabit most of it now.
You know what's really cool though? The host of the Crime Junkies podcast, they actually dedicate a lot of time, a lot of cases to going over missing people from indigenous cases. So that's really cool.
I know. I wanted to like listen to their cases about it, because they do like cover a lot. I remember listening to them. I wanted to go back and like write down some stuff, but life is busy.
Yeah, y'all. Me and Marina have 2 more weeks of this semester left, and then all of our finals. So bear with us a little bit. We're so close, y'all. We got 6 months and we graduate.
Yes, and then we can dedicate so much time to just learning more, beefing up our research, and just like, it'll be like a different podcast.
Absolutely, y'all. We are so excited for that.
Yes.
All right, y'all. Well, we appreciate all of y'all that come in, tune in every week, and listen and reach out to us as always. We hope that y'all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Make sure you follow our podcast at Southern Woke Podcast, or follow me at Caitlin Ricardo.
You can follow me at Marina Renee.
All right, y'all. We will see y'all next week with a brand new episode. Y'all make sure y'all stay woke.
Bye.